Document.querySelector method is the topic for today's lesson. We are learning JavaScript and we are learning JavaScript by examples. This is 38th lesson of the series and 8th lesson of the addition script. And in this series, we are trying to recreate this application which is available on this website here. And this is what we have done so far. And in last lesson, we learned how to bring focus to the first input element with the help of document.querySelector method. It is a heavily used method in JavaScript. So the querySelector method returns the first element that matches a specified CSS selector in the HTML document. The querySelector method returns the first element that matches a specified CSS selector in the document. So in this particular case, the tab index value of 0 is the CSS selector, but it can really be any CSS selector. Because it is a really important topic to explain the concept, I have decided to create a new document. So I will say file, new file, and I will save this as querySelector.html. Save it. I will minimize this. This is the document that we have just created, and it is a blank document at the moment. I will go back into the text editor and I will create a basic HTML skeleton. I will remove the things that are not absolutely necessary, and simply within the body I will create some divs, and the inner HTML of this particular div is I am div1, and I will make multiple copies of it. Control C and Control V, 6 copies. This is 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And I will also create an opening style tag and a closing style tag. Okay, and within these two tags I will create a CSS class, and that is how you create a CSS class. You type in a dot and then type in the name of the class. I will call it blue, and then 2 curly braces. I will say color blue and font size of 22 pixels maybe. If I save it, the class has not been applied to any of the elements. You should not see it applied. However, these elements, these inner HTML of these div elements is visible on the page. I will also say script, a closing and opening script tag and a closing script tag, and between these two tags I will write my JavaScript. I will say document.querySelector, and I will target the div elements, and I will say append I am the first div on the page at the moment. So what we are simply doing, we are using this method, querySelector method, to find the first div element, and this is the inner HTML of this div element, and we are simply appending a piece of text to this thing. Okay, so if I save it, if I refresh it, you will see that this text has been appended to the first div that the querySelector method finds, and this is what the querySelector method does. Although there are 6 divs on the page, this method has found the first div and has made a change to that first div as well. Okay, we can also attach the class with the help of this method, and I will target the divs again, and I will say class list, and we created a class called blue. I will say blue here. So you'll see that this class will be applied to the first element on the page that the method can find, the querySelector method can find. So if I save it, refresh it, you can see that the font size has been changed to 22 pixels and the color of the text is blue. Okay, so this is what the querySelector method does. So let me create an input element, and I will say placeholder. I will call it first, a line break, and I will copy and paste it here. This is the second input element. If I save it and refresh it, you'll see that there are two input elements here as well. Let me also target the input fields. A width of 700 pixels. So all the input elements are being targeted now. If I refresh it, you can see that the width of the elements has been changed to 500 pixels. Now we can also target input fields with the help of this method. Okay, so for input elements, you don't use append, you use value, and I will say I am the first input field on the page, and I will target input elements here, and I will also target input elements here. Okay, so the class of blue should apply to the first div and also to the first input element, not the second one, not the third one, just the first one. So if I save it, if I refresh it, I forgot is equal to sign here. If I save it and refresh it, you can see that this class, blue class, has been applied to the first input element. If I move this div 6 on top of the page, on top of all of the elements, you'll notice that this div 6 will disappear from here. This div 5 will be the last one, and div 6, which is the top one, will have this class. If I save it and refresh it, you can see that the changes are applied to div 6, and this is true for any div element that I move on top of the list. So if I save it again, you'll see the changes applied to the first div element. So it is a really powerful method, and it is a very heavily used method. So with the help of these examples, it may be quite difficult to understand what may be the benefit of it and how it is used. But if you look at this example here, it is really difficult to bring focus to the first input field without this method. And in this particular case, we are targeting a tab index value of 0, and the first element is selected. Now, if you remember from the previous lesson, all these input elements have a tab index value of 0, but the first input element is selected with the help of querySelector method, and the focus is brought to this first input field with the help of this method here. So that is it for today. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you very much.